You are listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Happy Wednesday evening, folks. No, it's not Wednesday, it's Tuesday. I'm a day ahead of myself. You know, you got 3 kids and you get them off to school and all of that. Now, I know some people have 6 kids or 5 or 4. We've got 3. We got all kinds of busyness going on. I sometimes have to pause and say, what day is it? It's Tuesday. It's the second day of the work week. So welcome to the program, folks. I'm Scotty Roberts. This is the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. And that's ODYSY1.com. Come on over, see where the show plays, and get all the goodness that is Odyssey Radio. Check out the other shows that are up there. Also, you're going to hear a lot of background noise today. For some reason, I noticed on my mic, it's picking up just about everything else that's going on in the house and the world around me today, and I'm not sure why. So, pardon that. I am not a soundproofed studio. I am a makeshift studio. So, there's where the source of the problem lies. So I want to thank you all for being here. I was going to say, go over if you want to hear or view the video simulcast over on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Join the other Intrepheads and get into the live chat, discuss things. You know, there's a real family of listeners that's growing over there. You may want to come, I don't know, maybe you're one of those, you know, people that are not a social butterfly. You don't really want to go talk and meet new people. That's okay. But if you want to come over and watch the video, you can do that. And if not, you can get all the goodness that is the audio stream on the radio over at ODYSY1.com, Odyssey1.com. And you can tell my mind is on a different ebb today. It's like I start talking and I say, "Hi, I'm Scotty Roberts. I'm your host with the Intrepid radio program." I had to remember where I was for a second there. So no, I haven't started putting my keys in the freezer or, getting lost when I walk down the street. I think my mind is pretty intact. However, I think there are days I'm a little more tired in the head than others, and this might be one of them. So it's been a long day. It's Tuesday. Thanks for being here, folks. Let's move on. You know, yesterday I talked about this Clouds Choir. And I know Leslie posted it over in on Facebook to some and tagged some of the followers of this show. This was a young man who was dying terminal cancer. He was a teenager actually, and he wrote a song. And something I didn't do, which adds to my scatterbrainedness this morning, was I didn't put up the lyrics so I could tell you what. Cloud song. I don't even know the title of the song. So I'm looking for the lyrics to this. Let's see if it comes up for me. And no, that's not it. That's a totally different one. That's the old Clouds, Joni Mitchell. Here we go. The kid's name was Zach Sobiek. And he was dying of terminal cancer a few years ago, and he wrote this song, and I've got the video today. I told you a bit yesterday how one of the local radio stations, KS95, the big powerhouse, since I was a kid, KS95 was playing, current hits and all of that, local to the Twin Cities area. And so every year now they do this Clouds Choir. They sponsor it, the morning show. It's Crisco, Des, and Ryan. And they sponsor this over at the Mall of America. And this year it was their 7th year doing this song. And it's to help raise funds for cancer awareness for kids. And they had 8,500 people come and sing in this cloud choir for honoring the memory of Zach and also raising money and awareness for children's cancer. And this is the video. I've got it potted up here so we can play it, but I talked about it yesterday, and it can be a pretty emotional thing. I know it is for me. It gets emotional even when I talk about it, and because it makes you, as we mentioned yesterday, think of the brevity of life. Makes you think of the irreplaceable moments of time that you have with your loved ones. It makes you maybe re-examine why you have the arguments you have with people, and how you would not want to leave those undone and unremedied. Things like that. And I've got the lyrics here. It's a little tough to hear the lyrics in the video because they're not mic'd up to the cameras. The cameras are picking up the sound reverberating in the 4 tiers of the rotunda at the Mall of America. And so the words can get a little jumbled. But they start the video out showing a little video of Zach himself when he first recorded the song. And the song goes like this. Let's see. It says, I fell down, down, down into this dark and lonely hole. There was no one there to care about me anymore. And I needed a way to climb and grab a hold of the edge. You were sitting there holding a rope. And we'll go up, 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 but I'll fly a little higher. Go up into the clouds because the view's a little nicer. Up here, my dear, it won't be long now. It won't be long now. When we get back on land, well, I'll never get my chance. Be ready to live and it'll be ripped right out of my hands. And maybe someday we'll take a little ride, go up, 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 and everything will be just fine. We'll go up, 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 but I'll fly a little higher. Go up in the clouds because the view's a little nicer up here, my dear. It won't be long now. It won't be long now. If only I had a little bit more time. If only I had a little bit more time with you. We could go up, 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 and take that little ride. We'll sit there holding hands, and everything will be all right. And maybe someday I'll see you again. We'll float up in the clouds and we'll never see the end. We'll go up, 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 but I'll fly a little higher. Go up into the clouds because the view's a little nicer. Up here, my dear, it won't be long now. It won't be long now. Now that's the lyric he wrote, and he played a song to it. And of course, lyrics don't come off all the time as pure poetry, because when you add music to things and there's different musical breaks and speeds and so on. But that gives you the idea of what he wrote, or exactly what he wrote. And so what I want to do for you, like I promised yesterday, I want to play this song for you. And let's see where I've got it queued up, right there. And take a listen to this. This was at the Mall of America last Friday night with local show hosts. And 8,500 people singing this song, raising awareness for cancer, raising funds for children's cancer. So here we go. I'm going to click this on. You should be able to see it now, and let's play it.
With you And that's how we do it here in Minnesota. That was amazing, you guys. That was incredible. So beautiful.
And it's a song he wrote. And just think of yourself for a moment. Think of needing to sit down, and if you so were in the position where you had to, you writing the words, if only I had a little bit more time. So I think make use of the time you have, and certainly be aware of the irreplaceable moments of time. And I think that's a good message for us all. But I was very moved by this yesterday, and I didn't have the video on hand, so I wanted to play that for you this morning. So there it is. Let's move on. All right, we were talking about things that really wrap around all of this stuff. Talking about our inner development, Christopaganism. Why do we believe what we believe? What are the things that make us develop this goal of interspirituality? And that should be a goal that we have, because the universe is connected. Everything about it is connected. But if you have one standout about your faith that excludes everybody else, you need to maybe look a little deeper and see if those beliefs are what you hold to because it's tradition. And I'm not saying just wipe out tradition for the sake of wiping out tradition. I've never been one of those that says, let's just revise tradition. That's not my goal. My goal is not to offend your spirituality. Well, maybe in a little tiny bit, in a little tiny sense. Sometimes it takes a little offending what we think we know, and taking a little offending of the traditions we hold to be able to come out on the other end and say, I had to have a little muscle torn down in order to rebuild it. And hopefully that's what we're doing here with all of this stuff. So we left off yesterday. We were talking about spiritual spiral dynamics and the developmental spaces in our lives. The things that make us do what we do, how we arrive at the conclusions we arrive, how we develop from one thing to the next thing, how we evolve from one thing to another. Remember, evolution is supposed to be the idea of the next stage gets better. It incorporates all of the last, and it makes room for the new. And so the spiral is this descriptive metaphor for the ways in which people's values grow, change, expand in a generally predictable order. Now, according to Beck and Cohen, each turn of the spiral marks the awakening of a greater capacity within the individual. So each turn of the spiral in our lives awakens something new. And so, which then those things are expressed as values and worldviews. Values and worldviews are other ways of saying belief system, the things I believe and the things I hold faith to. It's ideas that are deemed to be important and worthy of support and protection, especially in our lives, in our heart, in our spirituality, in our minds. Change from one group of values or beliefs to the next occurs when pressures build within an existing worldview to the extent that a person's carried on to another set of views and values, almost as though it were a wave just washing through and moving you closer. Or not close. I was going to say closer to the shore, but that's not the proper analogy. I'd say moving you on into something better. And these pressures often build because problems arise that can't be reconciled adequately to an individual's current value level. Its ability to respond is limited by the beliefs of its worldview, or the individuals in this value cluster may not even be able to see the problem adequately because of their worldview. So this is the pressure that builds up. And meeting the problem successfully often means you have to expand your own values. We have to expand our values to address the problem. We expand our values, our belief, and our worldview so that the problem can be adequately seen and then adequately addressed. And so the spiral of development is like a fluid in a way, using a metaphoric picture, with people and cultures that travel either up or down in it in their response to life's events and conditions. And at any time within a given society, different people are at a different place. So you might be at a different place than me. I might be at a different place than my mom, or my mom at a different place than your cousin, and so on. We all have these different places that we are. And we're at different places on this spiral, and meaning that everyone subscribes to a different cluster of values. However, a culture generally centers around one group of values at a time. Look at the last 50 years in the United States. Let's say you're younger than that. Look at the last 20 years. Look at how our value clusters have changed in America. Look at certain paradigms that were in place even 20 years ago compared to now. If you ever watched a show like Mad Men, one of my favorite shows about 1960s advertising in New York, and look at the way men treated women in the workplace as early as the 1960s into the 1970s. This is when I was a young kid growing into my teens. This is in my lifetime, and we've seen how those values have changed now. I remember when I first started, back even in the 90s, when I was in advertising, there were guys who would smoke in their offices, smoke at their desks. Look at how the paradigm in that has changed. So, different clusters of values kind of happen within a society, and they all kind of culturally center around one group of values at a time. So, and then we watch them change. And perhaps the level occupied by the majority of its members, and so a society can be identified as expressing one set of values more predominantly than the other. That doesn't mean there aren't people that hold to a different set of values. But culture generally flows along with the dominating value that marks it, with other people all over the board. And so now this is true for individuals as well. It's true for you and me, whose selves are composed of many facets, such as cognitive abilities, social skills, ethics, aesthetics, altruism, emotions, sexuality, just to name a few. Now, Wilbur, what was his title? I'm thinking of his title now. He's psycho, blah, blah, blah. I'll get to it. It's slipping my mind. And I've just got his name in my notes. So Wilbur calls these facts developmental streams, or lines of development. And he notes that each one of them develops at its own rate, and with some expanding faster for some individuals than others. That's why you'll notice different people. Say you are on a spiritual quest of your own, and you look at the people who guide you spiritually, and you say, that's a person I'd like to follow, but not that one. Or by follow, I mean listen to, adhere to what they have to say. But then maybe you find out personal things about them and go, wow, I don't know if I want to follow that person. There's people all over that influence who we are. And you are also influencers to other people's. So some people expand faster than others. It's all on an individual basis. A person might be very highly cognitive, but lack a sense of aesthetics or social skills. Have you ever seen that? Somebody really knows their stuff, they're a brain and a half, but they don't know how to comb their hair or dress, or, they wear 30-year-old clothes, whatever it might be. And I'm just kicking that out as a stupid example out of my head, the 30-year clothes thing. But you know what I mean. They might excel with their highly cognitive state of mind, but they've closed off other areas. So the streams follow the same developmental sequence that he identifies in his places of development, this Wilbur. And even though an individual has different streams operating at different levels at any one time, the self tends to identify predominantly with only one level of development at a time. So you might have all different kinds of things going on, but yourself, your true self, may only identify with one at a time. And these lines or these streams are essentially equivalent to the model of multiple intelligences found in the work of Howard Gardner. So now Beck and Cowan, they assign colors to the turns of this spiral, this developmental spiral. And they divide them into two groups that they call the first and the second tier. That's not too hard to remember. Now keep in mind, folks, we're not going to have a test on this on Friday or anything. I'm going through this material. Some of it you can let go in, you just kind of float around in there and let it move on. I want you to get an idea of how we get to this place. And so I'm going through some of this psychological stuff. So the first tier levels have to do with subsistence, growth of the organism, survival, cognitive and social development. So without exception, each level of the first tier thinking believes that its way is the only way, and it tends to condemn societies and individuals that occupy other levels. Now, second tier levels have to do with the being, as subsistence needs have been met, and the individual and the culture are free to explore wider frames of values. So they move from first to second tier, which these developers of this tiered system place at the yellow, and I'll show you a diagram in a few minutes here, marks a radical shift in thinking, where for the first time the individual is able to see all the levels of the spiral at once and travel to them at will. So let's go through some of these colors that Beck and Cowan prescribe to the spiral. And funny as it may seem, I'm talking colors, but I got a black and white diagram, which I'll show you in a minute. So beige. The first value meme Beck and Cowan identify is beige. And you know what? I've run over time. So I've got to cut out to break here. We'll pick up with these colors in a minute. Sit tight for 2 minutes. Be right back. Hey folks, we're back. Thanks for sitting through that break. And this is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network, and that's ODYSY1.com. You can also watch the simulcast video of this broadcast over on my YouTube stream, and that's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Join all the other Intrep heads over there and have a good time talking tonight through the show and about the show and maybe about other things. You might have a good time over there if you've never tried it out. So come on over, subscribe to the YouTube channel, click on the little bell, and it's going to send you announcements when it goes live. All right, we were talking about the spiral developmental chart, and I'm going to show that to you in a minute here. But they actually assigned colors to this, which you aren't going to see because I have a black and white version of the chart that I'll show you in a minute here. But the first value on this spiral stream is beige, and they call it the survival sense. Now remember, this is about our personal development, so survival sense. At this level, the self is barely aware of itself and its environment. It's driven by the urges to meet its physiological needs, things that you aren't even aware that you need sometimes. It's natural, it's physiological. Beige is seen mostly in infants, in the elderly, although a person can be arrested here due to illness or accident or disease or poor nutrition or regress to this level during emergencies. However, 100,000 years ago, beige would have represented cutting-edge thinking that separated humans from animals. And at the time of beige's emergence, the predominant social structure was the band or the tribe, and the technology was hunting and gathering, basically surviving. And as the sense of self develops, beige becomes aware of its dangerous and uncontrollable environment, discovers there is strength in numbers, and once it reaches this realization, beige is ready to transition to the next level. So now Wilbur identifies a similar stage of development. He calls it the sensorimotor, or the archaic. So it's one of those several terms that's borrowed from social scientists, and this is a stage normally experienced up to age 3. Now look at, if you've had kids, or if you remember back that far, look at where the mind is at age 3, where the awareness is at 1 to 3. This is the age the self is fed primarily by material sustenance, such as food, shelter, clothing. Then we move to the next color, purple. The second value cluster on the spiral is purple, also called kin spirits. Individuals band together to increase their chances of survival. Blood relationships are the connections that are really trusted, so close family, close friends, while outsiders are viewed with suspicion and hostility. And so in an attempt to understand the mysterious, the uncontrollable world, the supernatural, explanations are given to events. And these are the things that help us understand what's going on outside. That other village, they are from a different god. They are the gods that descended from the heavens, and so on. This is how it used to work. So myths and legends grow. Social and religious events are ritualized. Customs are deeply valued. And for the survival of the group or the tribe, and thereby the individual, it's very important to recognize the mystical meanings of signs and obey the desires of the spirit beings. The emergence of this level at about 50,000 years ago, purple is the evidence today. Wherever there are sacred objects, ceremonies, rituals, heirlooms, secret handshakes, private clubs, what are the things? Relics, things like that. Those are all indicative of the purple. And when it first emerged, the predominant social structure was the village. and the technology was horticultural. Learning to bond to a group is an essential part of this aspect of development. And so when the purple aspect begins to see its beliefs as superstitions, it's going to begin to want less ceremony. So when purple starts to see its mythologies as becoming less real, and the rituals becoming needing of less ceremony, they move toward a greater sense of self that is separate from the group. So once purple reaches this point, it begins to transition to the next level of the spiral. And the current number of the world population in purple are at roughly 10%. And the amount of power that purple groups exercise is 1%. I don't know how they gauge this number. It's through all different kinds of psychological mumbo-jumbo and taking of data and so on, and filtering data. So due to the nature of the existence of multiple colors overlapping in any given society, the percentages that Beck and Cowan are giving us don't really add up to 100%. So, but it's worth looking at because this is a descriptor of society in general, of different cultures in general. Now, Wilbur calls on this level of development as magical. You could almost name it egocentric, since magic means specifically spiritual practices in paganism and the veiled practices in Christianity, which is not the meaning given to the word by social scientists. That's not what they mean when they say magic. It's egocentric. So to avoid any confusion due to these different meanings, you have to pick one of the descriptors of this level, egocentrism, as the name for the level itself. All right? And so that's what we're going to do. And this space becomes evident between ages 3 and 6, the egocentric, the magic level. When do kids start getting mouthy and start whining because they want what they want and they fight you and they're like little sponges soaking up information? Age 3 to 6. That's where my youngest daughter is right now. Try to tell her anything right now, she knows it all. She's the boss. So people at this level, because she becomes fully aware of who she is and what power she can wield by throwing a temper tantrum or doing whatever she does. Not to trivialize the point, but you get the idea. People at this level might believe that nature and spirits obey their wishes. They have difficulty seeing or taking the perspective of others. That just makes me laugh. Children at this age, for example, believe that if they hide their heads, the rest of their bodies can't be seen. My little girl, over the last year, still does this. Sits on the sofa, throws the blanket over her head, and says, "You can't find me." It's because she can't see you, and you can't see her face or her head. So, in addition to the self's need for material food, the egocentric self now adds the need for emotional food. It's not just sustenance to live, it's sustenance to thrive emotionally, which includes bonding, power, security. The moral span of the self, what the self believes is worthy of respect, protection, or ethical consideration, extends no further than itself and its immediate group. So if an action benefits the self's immediate circle, then it's considered morally acceptable. I don't know, my dad kicks the dog. Therefore, it's morally acceptable to kick dogs, because that's their circle. That's what they see. So the next color is red, which you could call the power gods. The ego and self-confidence develop and express themselves with a wild impulsiveness. Red eras generally feature imperialism, frontiers, dictators, warlords. The tribe gives way to strong individuals who take control through the use of both charisma and force. Reds don't plan well for the future and must learn how to govern their use of power. If they don't, they can become very exploitative. Healthy red, however, is creative, adventurous, lusty, imaginative. Red is seen most often in the terrible twos of children, and again in puberty. Oh my God. I've had 3 kids go through puberty already, and I was there once myself, not long ago. Most video games are built around red themes, as they tend to involve warriors, conquerors, superheroes. And the emergence of red at roughly 10,000 years ago, at the time of red emergence, the predominant social cult structure was the empire. The technology was agrarian. And by empire, it doesn't have to mean a vast and worldwide empire. The empire of 50 feet, it could be. When concerns about its unbridled behavior creep into red, then it's ready to transition to the next level, which focuses on law, authority. The current number of the world population at red is roughly 20%. And the amount of power the red groups exercise is at about 5%. Next color is blue, which you can also call the truth force. Blue gives life meaning through rules and roles, absolute principles contained in a political or religious belief system. Blue societies contain some of the happiest and most contented people because everyone has a place and everyone stays in it. The society is orderly. It's punctual. It greatly values words and books. The emergence of the blue corresponds to the period when most of the world's religions were formed. Unfortunately, blue sees the world in black and white terms, with no room for gray. Tolerance is low. Dogma is at a high. By the way, I look at some Christian circles. I look at churches I've been in. Sometimes superficially, the people seem very happy because they are at the place, they are plugged in. But the world is black and white to them because of their belief system. So once blue stabilizes the world, doubts begin to creep in about all this order and this conformity. Different versions of the truth appear, and authorities begin to conflict with each other. And when this happens, people start disengaging from the opinions of external authorities. They begin to rely more on their own opinions. The percentage of the world at this point is roughly around 50%. So the amount of the power blue groups exercise is 30 to 40%. Now, Wilbur calls this developmental space the mythic, the rules-rolls, rules-rolls. And he notes that it's the first of the mental levels. The self moves beyond being nourished solely by material or emotional food, and now needs mental food as well. See, the emotional feeding isn't the same as the mental feeding, the cognitive feeding. One of the major developments for this level is the awareness of the roles that people play. And these roles are seen to be larger than life. They may become universal models. The grandiose view the self had of itself at the egocentric level is now transferred to the mythic gods of this level, which become the self's source of authority. These authorities might include parents, teachers, deities, the church. The self is conventional at this stage because it wholeheartedly adopts and adapts the beliefs and the conventions of its society. So the moral span of the self extends to those groups and entities that share its mythology. I'm gonna bring up this chart now. Let's find it here. Now, this might be a little hard to see because of the poor quality graphic I had to go from, but this gives you an idea of this spiral dynamics chart by Wilbur. And it's you can see over on the left column, it's the developmental states. Over on the right column is the societal technology. And in the middle are these colors that we just kind of went through. going from beige at the bottom, the survival sense, to purple, the kin spirits, to red, the power gods, to blue, the truth force, orange, the strive drive, green, the human bond, yellow, the flex flow, turquoise, the global view. And you can see all the things in this chart. If you stare at that for a second, you can see the different things that it does. And the different things that are explained there. Orange, right down there in the middle somewhere, is the next turn on the spiral. This is the strive drive. This is the turn of the spiritual, is noted for its possibility thinking. It's also entrepreneurial. It's competitive. It's often set into motion by a market economy and a rising middle class. That's about 1,000 years ago is where Beck and Cohen placed this having happened in our societies, in our cultures. Orange is accompanied by a rise in nation states and the beginning of industrialization. The society becomes more literate, wants to read and absorb information. Orange wants opportunities to excel and express itself. Oranges are masterful and self-reliant. But on the downside, they generally don't think about the long-term consequences. Because of their competitiveness, they may struggle with interpersonal relationships. So once orange begins to find its rugged individualism, a bit lonely, and becomes a little more interested in the needs of others, it's ready to transition to the next level. And sometime during late blue, the individual is going to transition into the developmental space, the rational, a space often reached in young adulthood. And here, I'm going to turn off that graphic right here. I think we've seen enough of that. But you get the idea of this whole spiral development thing. And they get to, when you get to the rational, the self begins to develop its logical skills. I like my shirt. I find your argument to be highly illogical. We start to develop those logical skills. We encounter universal abstractions, such as gravity, equality. It discovers that all people experience these abstractions, and even those who don't share its mythos experience these things. And this realization, this rational realization, begins to shake the self loose from its dependence on the prevailing myth as its sole sort of source of authority. I know we were told when I was in my biblical studies in the Baptist Church, the Bible is our one foundation for faith and practice. That was the saying. The Bible is is our one authority for faith and practice. So what happens when you start to shake yourself free of that? It's when your rational starts to kick in. Your realization kicks loose from its dependence on that. So this shift frequently begins and brings with it a lot of conflict, a lot of turmoil. I know I spent years, and I say I'm still at the tail end of that. I still have conflict and struggle over the changing of my faith, the turning my back on certain or exiting certain elements of that faith. And the new rational self is going to begin to critique the rules of society and rationalize the beliefs of its religion, of its culture, of its social values. If the beliefs can't stand up to a rational scrutiny, they may be abandoned. Get that? If the rational scrutiny of what you believe doesn't stand up to scrutiny, you might walk away from them. The self's moral spin increases and starts to include all the citizens of its country, regardless of their mythic affiliations. So now that brings us to the next color in that cycle, that spiral, the green, the sixth value cluster. That's green is community. It's community-oriented. It's interested in fairness, the proper use of resources. It's concerned with people's feelings and with the revitalizing spirituality in a non-dogmatic way. Ecological issues, the longer-term consequences might become important to a person in this stage. Gender roles are relaxed, and many other cultural distinctions such as race, ethnicity, sexual preference diminish in importance. Tolerance is at the high, and dogmatism is at the low. The social structure becomes increasingly planetary in scope, and the technology informational. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean, don't get me wrong here, I can already see what you're starting to think. That doesn't mean that we suddenly accept political correctness, or we suddenly accept only one version of science to describe what's happening to the earth around us. It does mean that we open ourselves up to be to think on a broader scale about these things. We don't necessarily have the black and white anymore of saying, like if you remember the story I told from way back in my past, that all gays, are an abomination to God, to where it becomes one of, I don't think God cares. That kind of a thing. So on the downside, the green enforces its own version of political correctness. It's particularly harsh toward the blues because green is still in the first tier thinking. It believes its point of view is the only correct one, no less than the earlier stages on the spiral. So green can be pretty puffed up with itself. They also favor giving entitlements or reparations to groups who've been damaged or overlooked in the past. So eventually, the expense of these entitlements stresses the society, and green begins to question the cost of all of this altogether-ness. And global problems may be pressing urgently for a response, and consensus decision-making might be unable to cope with them. So at this point, a person may transition to the next turn of the spiral, which also marks the beginning of the second tier. And this new developmental space at this level is called the pluralistic mind. At this level is the pluralistic mind. And at this level, the self can operate within meta-thinking systems and be at ease with a variety of perspectives. So the self is fully capable of abstract thought, and it's able to see multiple perspectives at once. And its moral span becomes more planetary in scope, encompassing all humans on the planet, the way we see things all around us. So, yellow. The turn from green to yellow on the spiral marks a hugely significant shift, as yellow is also called the flex flow. It's the first of the levels in the second tier, and it brings with it this complexity in thinking that surpasses even the best of the first tier. Now, all the turns of the spiral can be seen simultaneously and recognized as being legitimate turns of the spiral and necessary to us, necessary to growth. Yellow can balance contradictions. It's at ease with paradox. It's inner-directed with a strong ethical sense that's developed from within. It's the things we bring to the table. It's the way we move things. It's developed from within the self. It's often created from many sources, and its need for success and acceptance fades and usually favors minimal consumption. Yellow moves freely among all the levels of the first tier of the spiral and can interact effectively with persons at any level. Wilbur's divided his previous developmental space that he called vision logic into two levels, which he now identifies as low vision logic and high vision logic. Now, do you ever think all of this goes on in your mind? That all of this is part of the development of who you are? This is breaking it down and examining it and looking at it which is very different than just living. A lot of people are going to slap their foreheads and go, "What the hell are you talking about?" And so, that's exactly what this is meant to do. This lesson, last night's lesson, is to bring this awareness to us that this is what we all do. So you got the low vision logic and the high vision logic, with low vision corresponding to the yellow. And here the view of the self expands to embrace paradigms. You know what a paradigm is? It's a shift from one thing to another, a huge societal shift, a paradigm shift from one thing to another. You could say that the belief that there was multiple gods to the belief that there was only one monotheistic God was a paradigm shift for the people who chose to believe that. So this is, you're able to see the whole system as a whole. And this is the space that's at home with the yellow's strengths. It's also capable of holding multiple perspectives. It's comfortable with paradox, has a high level of tolerance for differing beliefs. Then you move on to the turquoise, and we've only got no time left. So we got to hit turquoise tomorrow, I hate to tell you. Folks, we're at the end of the show. Sometimes I don't look at the clock tight enough so I don't meter out how I'm going to say something. So we're ending abruptly right now. End of the show. Come back tomorrow night. We're going to tell you a little bit more about this, and we're going to get into some other things as we go along here. And we're eventually going to work our way to this whole self-consciousness, states of self-consciousness, developmental pictures of who we are and how we got there. So there it is. Folks, I got to go out for a 24-hour break now, 23-hour break, and I'll be back right after that. You guys hang tight. See you in a bit.